We're talking about triggers and I forgot. No, I haven't. So, on today's podcast, we're talking about recognizing your triggers to avoid disaster. So, we'll be covering what are your triggers, what triggers you, and finally coping with the mechanisms, and finally coping mechanisms to avoid disaster when you are triggered.
Yeah.
So, what have you been up to this week?
Oh, lots of working, which is good. I'm trying to kind of like minimalize my stuff, so I've been going through a lot of stuff. I went on a motorcycle ride yesterday. Was that yesterday? Yeah, yesterday. And this weekend I'm doing something cool. I'm going on a little road trip.
So you go and when you say a motorcycle ride, you go up to the top and look out over the cities,
Oh yeah.
like they do in the movies.
Yeah. We drive through the mountains and we would drive to lakes and rivers and mountains and overlooks and like beautiful natural places.
Reminds me of my days when I had a little 50 motorbike.
Yeah.
Did you have those little mopeds in the States?
Oh yeah, we have those. Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't old enough to drive a car and I wasn't old enough to get a bigger motorbike. So I had
Yeah.
this little 50 motorbike and literally you would lie down on it to go downhill just to
Yeah.
get an extra 2 miles per hour out of it.
There's two things I really like about it. The first thing I really like about it is that it makes me feel super alive. Like when you're on the back of the motorcycle and you're flying down the road, you're like, holy crap, this is dangerous. I could die. This is a good way to go out. Like, this is exhilarating. And then there's the part where I'm just like, driving through nature and in beautiful forests and trees and mountains. And it kind of reminds me of sailing.
Yeah, I can see that. On the front of the
Feeling really
Titanic when you're holding your arms out.
Yeah. I do. Sometimes I just kind of lift my head up and close my eyes and go, I can't put my arms out, but I'm like, ah.
For people watching this podcast on YouTube or on Patreon, we're actually doing impressions of the front of the Titanic.
Oh, yeah.
And we can, should we sing and do the noise?
No.
So triggers, what are they? I talk about triggers a lot on my lives on Facebook, and
Yeah.
it's something quite new to me in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
I've had them all my life, but I just
Right.
wasn't aware I had them or what they were.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
So what would you call a trigger?
I would call a trigger something that sets you off and takes you back to a feeling that you felt when you were going through something traumatic.
Yeah, that's like a shadow trigger, because also triggers are good things as well.
That's true.
It's the way I would explain a trigger is when something happens out there and you're aroused in some way. And it could be something good, something exciting. It could be something that terrifies you, but it normally comes from something in your past. So
yeah,
if you've had a good experience, I don't know, roller coasters, or a good experience with tall, dark men or something like that, and you suddenly see a roller coaster or you suddenly see a tall, dark man, you'll be triggered. You'll be like excited by it because you've had a good experience.
True.
And equally the opposite.
Yeah.
And the perfect example for me and my trigger is whenever anybody comes near me with Guinness. Do you have Guinness in the States?
Oh, I love Guinness.
No, I've got nothing against Guinness, apart from the fact that I was at a friend's house when I was about 13, maybe 12, and he was really cool and I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I was staying there the night, and he pulled a big drawer out from underneath his bed and said, "Oh, what do you want to drink?" And there was loads of cans of beer. This friend was like 13 years old. He was so awesomely cool.
Yeah.
And I just hand on my hip, really cool. And I normally drink Guinness. It was the only one I recognized.
Right.
So I drank one can, thinking that would be it. And he said to me, "Oh, do you want another one?" And at that moment, I knew the answer should have been no.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was bloated. I was feeling it. I was like, and what did I say? Yeah, I always have two.
Yeah, right? No,
Oh
peer
my.
pressure is a totally real thing, like, even as an adult.
It's like, and I was ill,
Yeah.
but I couldn't let him know I was ill. I kept creeping to the toilet at night,
Mhm.
over the night because I stayed there. And I got home the next day and I was just like, I hid it so well, I think.
You
And I
think?
cannot even smell it now. I cannot even go near it because my
Oh,
whole
yeah.
body goes through that whole process of,
Oh. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh,
Stevie,
yeah.
you are poisoned by that stuff.
Oh, yeah. I'm like that with, like, hard liquors, like, I can't, like, oh, man, they make me so sick, I can't even stand the
Mm.
smell of them.
And what is interesting is the fact that it's not just thought, it's the thought, the feeling, the
Mhm.
smell,
Oh,
the
yeah.
everything. Your whole body reacts as if you've just done that thing again.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Because it
and
takes you right back to how you felt because, like, ultimately, we don't remember the details of things that happen, but we always remember how it made us feel.
yeah. And it's a whole body feeling. It's not just a and this is the degree of triggers because we don't always know or remember the event that caused it.
Right. Yeah,
So,
that's true.
so my phone and my iPad's ringing. We don't always know what triggers these things, and it could have
Mhm.
been something from our really young childhood that we cannot remember.
Yeah.
And even I've learned in recent years that you can even have attachment issues prior to the ego forming at like 7 or 8 months old.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
if your mum wasn't exactly that attentive to you, or
Yeah.
your mum went through the problems herself,
Mhm.
it might have affected you in later life, but you would have no idea.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Yep, yep, that's where most of my triggers come from, not all of them, but, I mean, I've, like, obviously, my whole life had triggers, not been aware of it, projected them onto other people. But now that I'm becoming more aware of what those things are, I'm like looking at them and going, okay, why is this making me feel like this? When did this happen before? And then, I tell myself, okay, well, that was in the past. That happened. That was a different person, what have you. But yeah, definitely.
And that's the next part, is becoming aware of these triggers,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and going through our lives and going to a barbecue or going to a friend's place and doing things, being aware of, well, that triggered me last time. This is the reaction I had. And going
Mm-hmm.
into a similar situation, I suspect I'm going to have the same reaction. How
Mm-hmm.
can I deal with this instead of reacting? How can I respond properly?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that awareness changes everything.
It does. It does. It changes everything. It does. I've
So,
done that.
so what can we do to, because yeah, you cannot emphasize enough how much awareness is, and you can only do something about it if you're aware of it.
Right. I mean, that's the first step. That is absolutely the first step, becoming aware that something is triggering you. Realizing that, oh my gosh, I'm super, super, like, okay, I'll use an example of my own. So I recently um, realized that I get really triggered when people flake on me and blow me off. And I used to tell myself, oh, well, it just bothers me because people should do what they say they're going to do and do what's expected and da 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 da. But now that I'm aware that that's a trigger for me, um, I know better than to expect people that have done that to me to, not do it again. Like I have friends that are naturally flaky people. They don't mean to be. They're not doing it on purpose to me. And like I know that's a trigger. So I lower my expectations in that regard. Um, and then trying to think of where it came from. Oh gosh. I don't know. I have a lot of triggers that are kind of around things like abandonment issues and not being understood and not being respected.
Well,
And
that
I think,
comes down to the flaky as well, because
yeah, exactly.
you know, if I make a date with you, for
Hmm.
example, if we did, we got married on the last podcast because you organised that.
Oh yeah.
But if I made a date with you and then 2 hours before the date, I just blown you off and said, "Nah, I got to work late" or something like that. That is abandonment. That is,
Hmm.
the person not respecting you.
Yeah.
So it really does run deep. And the whole point is, like we said at the beginning, these
Hmm.
triggers have been with us all our lives.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And we're gaining new triggers all the time.
yeah,
New people we meet and different things like that, different experiences will give us triggers.
yeah.
It's like if you're frightened of spiders, it's a trigger. If
Mhm.
you're frightened of dogs, it's a trigger from somewhere.
Mhm.
Spiders is a
Right.
funny one because
Yeah.
how many people, especially grown-ups, go up to little children of like 1, 2 years old, and they do that incy wincy spider up the arm, and they tickle them. And so basically, this great big person leans over you, attacks you up your arm, and then attacks you underneath your neck.
And then
And
says, "Don't be
all,
scared of spiders."
yeah, exactly. And then you suddenly see your mum run out the room when they see a spider.
Yeah. Yeah. But the beauty of like being aware of where those things come from is that now I have a lot more patience for them.
Yeah.
Now I can go, okay, I know this kind of thing triggers me, so I'm not going to overreact. I'm going to take a minute before I respond and recognize that this person has their own things going on in their own life, and I don't know why they're blowing me off, but they probably aren't doing it intentionally. They probably have something more important that they have to take care of, and like it allows me to be more understanding,
Yeah.
and slowly those triggers are less and less painful.
And to use your example,
Mhm.
I would recommend it's a balance between boundaries and what you're willing to put up with.
Oh yeah.
And also the fact that it's your trigger, it's your past, it's your thing. It's not something personal.
Oh
They're
yeah,
not doing
yeah.
it to you deliberately.
Right, right.
So it is a balance between, and you cannot simply say, do you know what? Everybody can treat me flaky because I've been triggered from something when I was
Right.
6.
Yeah, what I do now that I'm aware of this, is instead of getting upset and taking it personally, I say, okay, that's fine. This person can make their own decisions. I'm just going to stop sending them invitations.
Yeah.
They're going to come to me now. I'm going to stop inviting them out if they're going to flake on me. And I'll do that with anyone. I do that with everyone.
But it is remembering that it's your trigger. Don't blame them. Don't get mad with
Exactly.
them.
Exactly.
Um, and who knows? They may not. They may have been triggered by something, and that's what stopped them
Exactly.
going to the date. We don't know because we all have them, and we're generating them all the time. I'm just trying to think of a few other things that I get triggered by. I
Oh
get
yeah, like
triggered
I
by.
I had a guy recently that flaked on me on a date. He flaked twice on me actually, um, but I didn't get mad because I understood that he was just anxious and nervous and scared, and so I just kind of was like, okay, well, he's triggered. He's triggered by whatever is making him anxious and scared to do this.
You.
Me, I'm so scary.
That's why. That's why I don't mind doing this for you because I know you're the other side of the world. If you said, Stephen, let's actually go out on a date, I'd be flaky and go, I can't do that. I'm terrified. I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding. That's completely put me off now, though. Right.
Um,
But yeah, there was something I had to say before that, but I forgot.
so how would you tell people what would you tell people to do to become more aware of their triggers?
The question we need to keep at, because the wisdom is always in the question.
Hmm.
Question everything. We're
Yeah.
taught that as a child, question everything, but yet we're not allowed to question our parents. It always goes me up. That was always a trigger for me. But one of the other triggers, the big triggers for me is, and they're less now because of the work I've done, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But one of the big triggers always used to be when someone used to hold the mirror up to me and show me
Mm.
who I was.
Oh, yeah.
And very often, the one big trigger we have is people pointing out our flaws.
Oh, yeah.
And we will really, really get annoyed, especially when narcissists are faced with narcissists.
Yeah.
So basically, whenever any teenager faces another teenager,
Right.
and, and essentially, whether we like it or not, all of us have to go through some kind of narcissistic phase to
Yeah.
build who we are. And then when people point out that I'm a narcissist or a manipulator, oh my God, it triggers me. And it always used to trigger me because I was adamant I wasn't that.
Mhm.
And while I was fighting, everybody was pointing out what I was
Mhm.
by triggering me. And I
Mhm.
was fighting it constantly because that wasn't me. And I was annoyed by being triggered. But they
Mhm.
often say what annoys you most is where your
Mhm.
freedom is, because when you become
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
um, when you realize it, when you realize what triggers you realize who you really are,
Yeah.
and then you can do something with it.
Yeah.
And so the awareness is, ask the question, and it goes, what's happening inside right now?
Mhm.
How am I being affected by this?
Mhm.
And why am I being affected by this?
Yeah.
And never blame the external.
Yeah.
Always
Oh,
think of
yeah.
it internally, because it's what's going on inside of you.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because I spent my life fighting the spiders, but I
Mhm.
can sit here and look at a spider now and not be affected by it.
Yeah.
And if you ask me to pick it up and you ask me to spend some time doing the tango with it, no. But I can sit here and not be freaked out by it,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. See,
because
yeah.
the fears are rising. I'm
Mhm.
aware of it. I'm aware it's a trigger. I'm
Mhm.
aware it's just a spider.
Mhm.
So you're creating that gap between what's coming up for you and how you respond to it, rather than the habitable reaction. We
Exactly.
normally jump straight to our subconscious mind and go, what did we do last time? And we
Yeah.
do the same thing again.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
awareness closes the gap between what's coming up and responding rather than reacting.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, because I used to get super, super triggered by things that would trigger my insecurity about abandonment. Like, things like someone not hearing me out when I had something to say, or walking away from me. Like, that would set me off so bad if, like, I was arguing with someone and they just walked away from me, and stuff like that. And by becoming aware of that trigger and realizing I needed to work on myself because it was my problem, I learned to be more patient. I learned to give people space. I learned to not, like, grab on to them when they were trying to run away, and chase them down. And I learned to look internally and feel good on my own 2 feet and feel like I didn't, need someone else. Um, so, and that's the thing. You got to stop and think about how, when you feel triggered, you got to stop and think about how you're feeling, what you're feeling, and reflect on where is that really coming from. And I find it's helpful to kind of try to separate myself from my emotions. Like, here's my emotions, kind of like thoughts. Here's thoughts. Here's emotions. I'm separate from them. That way, like, I try to visualize them and picture them and see them separately. That way I can really analyze them and look at them and not feel so attached to them.
Yeah. I want to go back to where you were saying about your triggers of abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
It's just amazing at how much of your life that one issue as a child, that shadow,
Oh, yeah. Well, it was
affects
reinforced.
everything.
Yeah, it was a lot of times when you have kind of a deep insecurity like that, it gets reinforced throughout your life. It was like massively reinforced for me. Um,
And it just keeps escalating.
exactly, exactly.
Self escalating.
I know what you're trying to say.
um, and the problem is, unless we become aware of it, unless we can see these shadows, the other thing we can do to see these shadows is really, because we call them shadows because we
Mhm.
cannot see them ourselves.
Yeah.
it's very much like the science. This is the geeky side of me. Uh, I like explaining it this way. The scientists believe there's a really big planet somewhere in our solar system,
Mm-hmm.
but they believe it's made out of a material that's completely non-reflective.
Mm-hmm.
So they cannot see it. But they
Mm-hmm.
can see the effect of it on other planets, the gravitational pull. So they
Mm-hmm.
kind of know where it's to. They kind of see the direction, but they just cannot bounce no light off it to see it
Right.
being there. And
Yeah.
that's very similar to what these are. We can see the effects of them. We can see the effects of these on other people. You know, we come in and say something to our partner and they go mental. And you're like, wow, where did that come from?
Right.
And
Right.
we often then take it personally. Well, I didn't say anything that you know, you don't have to fly off the handle on me. Well, it's got nothing to do with you. It's just something in that moment caused a reaction,
Oh yeah.
you know. And yes, you might have been the final trigger to it, but
Mm-hmm.
you weren't the one that loaded I was going to say gun. Guns are fine. But you weren't the one that loaded it all those years.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
just you were the
Exactly.
one that triggered it finally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but then we take that personally because then we're triggered.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's just a mess.
But see, that's exactly why you can't like run away from your fears and your insecurities or try to pretend like they don't exist, because if you don't work those things out,
Yeah.
you're going to get triggered and you're going to bleed all over people that didn't cut you.
When people point out something to me now that I don't like them pointing out to me, I still get that feeling of the hairs on the back of my neck stand up.
Mm-hmm.
I
Oh
still
yeah.
get that initial, you know, that initial deep breath. I am ready to fight. I've
Right.
never had a fight in my life, but I am ready to fight. You know, all of those that whole my whole body goes into this alert mechanism that is
Hmm.
ready to.
Oh yeah.
And someone's just said something, and one of those things a few years ago, somebody texted me that I was a manipulator.
Hmm.
How dare someone call me a manipulator?
Right.
I'm a really nice guy. I do loads of things for people. I help people. I buy things for people. I treat everybody nice and kind. I'm
Hmm.
not a manipulator. And oh, it did not go down well with me.
Yeah.
But I was on a spiritual journey.
Hmm.
So whereas now it's normally a few minutes, maybe
Hmm.
10 minutes or so. Then it was a few days.
Hmm.
And after a few days of calming down, I looked at it and thought, well, am I? And I looked at it and thought about it a bit more. And I realized that I am quite a manipulator.
Hmm.
I have a manipulating streak in me. I have something that's really important to me. And I think it's quite universal. I like people to like me. It's
Yeah.
really huge for me.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, I might buy them something.
Hmm.
For example, I've just bought the girls on the town council, the civil servants in there, some cookies the other day.
Hmm.
Now then, is that manipulating? Am I making them like me? Well, no, it's a nice thing to do.
Yeah.
But I've got to ask myself, am I manipulating the situation?
Yeah.
So I'm aware of it now.
Yeah.
I'm aware of, you know, is this person going to leave me? Is this person not treating me right? Am I now going to make them dependent on me by being nice?
Hmm.
Which is counterproductive. It doesn't
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. No, that's super common. I see it a lot actually.
But that's the awareness, is realizing what we do. You
Hmm.
know, you don't suddenly start a spiritual journey. You don't suddenly become aware of all these triggers and have none.
Right.
They're still there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You
you're not
just
going to suddenly get rid of them all.
no, I think you really just learn how to handle them better. And that's the thing, like life is unpredictable. Things are gonna happen. And you really just learn to handle it better. You just learn to handle it better.
The assholes will still piss you off.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh yeah.
You just don't have to make it a violent thing. You don't have to
Right.
keep telling that same story for the next 3 days and put it on Facebook.
Yeah. It's about taking it to responding to the situation rather than just reacting to it.
Yeah.
Which is huge.
You're still going to be cut up in the road, which is a big thing that triggers everybody.
Oh yeah.
We take that so personally.
Yeah.
How dare they set off this morning to deliberately make me late and deliberately threaten my life?
Yeah. See, I go out of my way to remind myself when anyone does anything to me that I don't like, you know what? They're doing this because this is who they are. Uh, they think this is okay. They don't, they look at it differently than I do. And it's not personal. They're not doing it to me personally. They would do the same thing to any other person.
And it is creating that gap between it arising and recognizing everything you just said.
Yeah.
It's like the three minds, the first mind comes in is, am I going to die right this moment? No. Send it over to the subconscious mind. It looks through the filing cabinet. How did I do it last time? Well, I shouted, I flipped my middle finger, I screamed out the window, and I drove off, and I plastered it on Facebook and phoned all my family to tell them how this incredibly inconsiderate person set out to ruin my day today. And the third
times.
and we've all done it. And then if we create that gap, the subconscious mind says, well, last time it wasn't that good. It didn't work out that well. Over to the human mind. And the human mind goes, well, look, I've made mistakes. He didn't come out there to deliberately ruin my day.
Right.
I was already late before he did that. I was already on the back foot. It's okay. And drive off.
Yeah.
And you don't carry it for the rest of the day.
Right, exactly.
It wasn't set out to get you.
Like that right there is a big, big key to feeling peaceful in your day-to-day life.
It's like David Poley about the garbage truck. Have you ever heard that?
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. Yeah.
Shall I share the story?
Yes.
Yeah, he was in a New York taxi cab, and he got in the back. He was on the way to a business meeting or something. He was in a rush and all that. And he said, come on. And then the taxi driver was driving down the road, and this guy cut them up and was really close. And the taxi driver just waved and drove on. And he was in the back. He said, oh my God, he almost killed us. That was so close. You were so lucky. Why did you just wave and go on? That guy did all this to you. And he said, well, people are like garbage trucks. If you allow them to spew their rubbish and all everywhere, if you take it on board and you carry it around all day, you'll do the same to everybody. Don't be a garbage truck. And that's the story. It's a really good book, actually. He's got like all different ways in which we could not carry things with us. Yeah. And it's true. Everybody is carrying something.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And this perfectly takes this podcast in full circle. We are carrying so much baggage, and all that baggage is triggers.
Yep.
And it's learning to recognize, right, I'm being triggered now. So ask ourselves the question, going into work, this particular person always triggers me. Ask why.
Yes.
Probably nothing to do with him. It's probably because somebody that looked like him when you were 12 years old used to get on your nerves, nicking your pencil at school.
Yeah.
And then you laugh about it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I've made your life hell for the past 3 years in work simply because someone that looked like you used to nick my rubbers at school.
Yeah, it's kind of silly when you put it that way, isn't it?
But it's true. That's what it is.
True.
That's what triggers are.
Yeah.
We're blaming the current things that are happening on something that's happened to us in the past.
Yeah. Let's talk about some like coping skills we can use when we do feel triggered.
Take a deep breath.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what? In all fairness, there's so many coping skills. After you ask the questions, just whatever arises, you've always got time to take a deep breath.
Yeah.
If you haven't, you're not going to know.
That's the first thing I do.
Take a deep breath.
Take a bunch of deep breaths.
And I don't think it needs to be confused with another 10 different coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
Take a deep breath and be okay with what's arising.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can focus on the good things that are coming up right now.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like where they can find you, Susan.
Me?
Yeah.
Susan'sInspirationspace.com.
And you can find me on stephenwebb.com. And you can hear us on many different platforms now.
Yeah.
If you go to flipitandrebuildit.com,
Mm-hmm.
you can find us on iTunes. You can find us on Spotify very soon.
Mm-hmm.
Castbox,
Google
Anchor,
Play.
Google Play. Yeah, a few different places. I can't keep
Patreon.
up.
Well, yeah, I know. But that's good,
And
right?
Patreon, yeah. And you can watch our videos
Yeah.
on Patreon.
Yeah, yeah. Our behind the scenes videos.
So thanks for listening, guys. Give us a review. Say hi. Have you got any triggers or anything like that in any of the comments? Really appreciate that.
Definitely.
Namaste.